Hi, I'm John. Welcome to Edgetone Studios. In part 6 of my console restoration video, I was at the point where I'd had calibration going on. I'd gotten most of the console together and functioning. And now in part 7, you find out, do I finish it? Do I move it in? What will happen? Stay tuned. Trying to do right now is disassemble this Amber 3501 intermodulation distortion analyzer, and here it is. I'm got most of it apart. I'm trying to get the front panel off to get at this lower circuit board here so we can get it recapped. Got the manual here. It tells me how to take it apart. It's a real pain tracking everything, all these little screws. If I can get this thing working, then I can fully calibrate the MXP-3036. That's my goal. Well, I managed to get the entire unit apart. So there it is. And there are the 3 different circuit boards. There is one at the back for the power, but the power's working. So really we're just going to get this recapped. There aren't even a lot of capacitors on here, so shouldn't take too long. Then I'll reassemble it. There's lots of labeling on the cables. They say what places they connect to on which boards. I'm just trying to keep everything where it was on each side so that I don't have to re-thread things. And then once that's back together, I'll have a working intermodulation distortion analyzer for the console. So cool. So much work. So here I am with VU meters, and I'm replacing the resistors because I found that these ones here, which are the new ones, 1000 ohm resistors, these ones only ended up being 300 ohm resistors. So that's why they were so bright. So I've done those 2. They worked out great. I'll do the other 2, and then I'm waiting on more to come in stock because our local store was out of them. But slowly getting the VU lights looking great. It's all an important part of having a studio. Is the aesthetics and the sound. Oh, the sound. Okay, now I've replaced some of the 300 ohm resistors with 1000 ohms, so that's the middle ones there. These ones are more bright, and these ones are a little bit dimmer. And if you get low enough, you can really see the difference in brightness. Maybe not so much on the video because it washes it out from a distance maybe. Yeah, you can see how the middle ones are less bright. It's going to look a lot better. So I'm testing out the computer in the garage with the console. Got Studio One, got several tracks playing through several buses there. Got control over levels here. More drums, more synth. Yes, I could eventually do some analog mixing. I'll probably still mix in the box, but this is how it's starting to look. It's going to be a great tracking machine. Well, I tell you, I feel like I've been here before. Just connecting hundreds of cables and getting ready to reconnect them in a different way. I'm moving my desk into the tracking room temporarily until I get the console in here. So that's what's on the agenda today. So much work. Okay, it's console restore day 203, and I've just finished cleaning out the studio. The control room is now very empty and ready for us to move the console in. Everything's pushed to the back. I've set my desk up in the tracking room, so it's now very tight in here. All my gear's over in the corner. Desk is there so I can continue to work. And yeah, the cat is ready for the change, aren't you, kitty? So Callie thinks this is awesome. And yeah, maybe 2 or 3 days before I can get the people together to move this beast in here and then start trying to figure out how to cable everything up. It's going to be great. So while I was waiting on the resistors for the VU meters and waiting to schedule people to move the console into the studio and waiting for the recap of the Amber intermodulation distortion analyzer, I decided to finally go through every channel and do the initial calibration of the settings for the VCAs. So I was able to do 2 at a time because I had 2 extender cards borrowed. And that made the work a little bit quicker, but it still took several hours to go through everything. Okay, I've been calibrating the board here. Just got to channel 20. This channel 19's signals, the positive and negative phase for the oscillator. If I switch this over to 20, that's what I'm getting. That's really weird. I thought it might be the board wasn't seated well, but I tried the patch points a couple times. It looks like I'm getting kind of half the negative signal. It's weird. I think that's a patch bay issue, but I guess I'll just have to calibrate the rest of this channel and hope it works okay. And my multimeter's been on long and warning me that it's going to turn off. Okay, back to it. So I swapped channel 9 and 19 so I could test a different card to see if it was a card. And the oscilloscope is showing both signals and they're fine. But if I swap this over to number 9, which number 19 is currently in, look at those sine waves, they're way off. That's after centering them. So obviously adjusting the resistor here moves them a bit. Whoops. Moves them around, but it won't ever get them back center. So something wrong with this card. So I might just swap this card for one of the spares I bought. So I just plugged in one of the spare cards that has transformers on it and take a look at the oscillator here. That does not look good. We're not even getting sine waves off this card. So I think I won't use that one and I'll try something else. Okay, this is the old channel 22, which I pulled out when I was doing my initial testing. I'll have to check my documentation. I don't remember why it was doing something weird, but maybe I didn't know enough at that point in time to see if it was any good. So I'll put the original back in and compare one more time. Okay, so here we are again. So this one definitely is not working right. So I'm going to take the module I put in 22 and put that in 19, and then put 22 back in 22 so I don't have to relabel things. So I got back to swapping modules in and out, did some more testing, and okay, so this is the second of the spare modules I bought that have transformers on them, and it's coming up with the proper sine wave, so I'm going to continue with that one. So with the module that looked okay in place, I got back to calibrating channel 19. Okay, I can't get that board that I just put in to get the values anywhere near what the other boards go to. So instead of 12.16 volts when the fader is down, I'm getting like 11.69, and then it won't go any higher. And the other value, when you put it to the top, is supposed to be 5.03, and it's like stopping at 6 point something or other. So I don't know if that's because of the transformers, because it came from Europe. I don't think so. It was a CBC board that went to Europe and came back. So I guess that board's not going. So I'll just mark channel 19 is non-functional for the moment. Okay, this is the weirdness going on with channel 23, and you think those sine waves look really out of whack. Something's wrong until you bring these together and you try to adjust the resistor. Whoops, sorry about that. It's going to affect them, and you realize you're adjusting the little waves because you're looking at 63 hertz here. So that's like noise in the system. We want to go even think we're getting a sine wave out of this thing. It's weird. Okay, I get the same problem if I put channel 31 into channel 23's strip, so it might be a fader issue. It could be something with the boards. I'm going to try 23 and 31 strip. Okay, channel 23 strip in the slot for 31 shows a perfect sine wave, so there's something going on with that slot, the fader of the slot. Okay, I literally just got underneath the patch bay, reseated everything there, reseated the cables on 23 and 24, which were both having trouble. And now plugged into 23, everything's looking fine. So, kind of makes me wonder about the other channel 19, whether it was a cabling issue. So finicky. Okay, I just got to channel 35 and I was adjusting the sine wave and it wasn't moving, and then I patched into 36 and it started moving, but I was in 35 here. So I went down underneath and found out that I'd misconnected those two cables there backwards, so I flipped them the other way. Another thing corrected on this board, soon it'll be ready. And here's a look at the older VCA board, which doesn't have transformers, compared to the newer VCA board, which does have transformers. Still don't know the difference. Okay, the resistors came in for the VU meters and I've just finished soldering them up. So now they're all at a nice consistent level of brightness. I guess the big ones look slightly dimmer because they're bigger, so the light covers a larger area, but overall the board is looking wonderful now. I'm all ready to start taking it apart to get ready for the move into the studio in a couple days, as soon as I arrange some people. So my goal for the move was to remove every component I could that would be easy enough to remove and get the weight as low as possible. Disconnect the legs to the point where it was just sitting on the legs and ready to be lifted off, and then be able to carry it out of the garage and up the walkway and get it up the stairs and twist it into the studio. So I took out all the channel strips, the master sections, the VU meters, the faders, and then eventually took off the wood sides except for on the meter bridge, just because they were a little bit finicky, and got it as light as possible. And then came the fateful day, and my buddy Zach from Alderley Vineyards here in town brought his work crew along, and my friend Andrew showed up as well. So we had 6 of us, and Tracy took the camera so I could get some footage. And after a quick little safety briefing on what to be careful about, we got to lifting this beast of a console into the air and starting the slow progression out towards the studio. And when we got into the driveway, we did a little bit of leaf blowing into it to get the last of the dust out of there, because I didn't want to do that in the garage and get dust of the garage blowing all around even more. So we carried it out to the steps and put it down on this small carpeted dolly I've had for years. Back in the 80s, I made this to move pianos when I was in music school. I owned a piano. I moved a lot of pianos, and this little carpeted dolly can hold a lot of weight, so I knew it would be good for the console. And then we hauled this thing step by step up these stairs, and thankfully the strong young guys were on the back, because this thing weighs a ton even without all the modules in it. You can see just the effort involved in lifting it up a few steps. You can only get a few at a time, take a little rest, and then do a little bit more. And once it was on the top, we were able to slide along. I wasn't worried about the metal front of it because it was going to be covered by the armrest. And of course, in all the preparation for this move, I'd taken the railing off the back. I'd thought very long and hard about exactly how we're going to move this in. The meter bridge is facing this way, specifically because it's going to go over top of the counter that's inside the door. We were able to get it on the dolly and slide it around, and once we maneuvered it through the door, we got the dolly underneath it again, and then we're able to slide it on in. So this was probably the most difficult part, because we were trying to get people to fit between the door and on the planter, and the railing was a little bit in the way, and there's only certain places you can grab because you can't really grab the whole meter bridge directly. You don't want to bend it. But finally we wrangled it onto the dolly, and then it was a lot easier to slide it through the door, and after that it was pretty well just smooth sailing. So this was, like I say, probably the most complicated part of the move right there. One last lift, and then we're into slide mode, and almost sliding sideways, of course. Now, as we made the final move to slide this beast into the studio, the one thing that was going through my mind was, oh God, I hope I enjoy using this thing, because it's going to be really hard to convince anybody to carry it back out of here again and do what you ever want to. But I was happy, and with it now in the studio, the next step was to go and get the legs and attach them. And part of the plan was to take the pads off the bottom of the legs, and then I was going to attach some felt pads so it would be easy to slide the console around on the vinyl plank floors I have in the studio. It's a concrete slab, vinyl plank floors. It should be very easy to slide. The problem is that it weighs 900 pounds when everything's together. And here you can see the massive brass pads that are on the bottom of the legs normally. And I bought these 4-inch wide self-adhesive pieces of felt. And so we got those attached on each of the legs. And then, with the pads in place and the legs all secured, we tried to tip it and it slid. No, we got some leverage and slowly tipped it into place. And the console was now seated in the control room. And I did a test slide to make sure it could slide across the floor easily. I mean, all the channel strips aren't in there yet, but it did move reasonably easily. Oh, yeah. Da, 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 da. Woo. Beers are in the mini fridge. Okay, the console is now in the studio, and I'm just test fitting things and trying to figure things out. So what I found is that my keyboard tray idea works reasonably well. Basically all this is there's some brackets underneath the tray there. They slide underneath the little notch there that's normally for the armrest, and that's nice and solid. But it's a little bit too high, so I'm trying to figure out a way to get it a bit lower just for ergonomic sakes. And then secondly, looking at where the TV is, I'm probably going to have to raise it just because it's too low for the console. But the other issue is this monitor arm I have won't even be able to go all the way back there because it's taller than the TV. So I'm going to have to cut that down. My plan is to take those side sections of my old desk. That side I will put our rack rails in on the lower part and leave the drawer just so I have a drawer space, and the other side, and slide them in to either side of the console. So the drawer side will end up holding the amplifiers probably, or maybe it'll go on that side, I'm not sure. Doesn't really matter, but that'll give me rack space. And then ideally I'd have a rolling rack that sits under here and comes out with most used rack functions such as compressors and mastering EQ and bus compressor. So that's where I'm at the moment. Well, with some quick work of a hacksaw and a clamp and a Dremel, I've shortened this thing down to 8 inches, so that should be perfectly fine for the monitor to fit under the TV. Okay, from my seated perspective, the TV is just a bit too low when I put the monitor as low as I'm going to have it. and I've got a little bit forward. It could go back a bit, but I'm going to have to bring the TV up about 4 inches, about to the line that's the last line of boards, just that line right there. Well, there was and still is a lot to do to get the console fully commissioned into the control room. But one of the aspects was putting the metal panels back on. Now, I hadn't touched these things since I took them off, got the rust off of them as best I could, and cleaned them back in the spring. So they've just been sitting. I wiped them all down, managed to get them reattached, and I left the last one off because that's right below the patch bay, and also where I'm going to be mounting the Motu 16A converters. I need that space open for cables to get through. So one of my big concerns when I was planning to bring this massive console into the studio was whether my giant PC, yes, I use Windows for audio, would fit underneath it, because that's where it needs to sit. I'd already removed the legs so that it could be a bit lower, and I put back on the panels. And then the question was, would the PC still fit underneath here, or would I need a new case? And look at that. I've got like a millimeter, half a millimeter of clearance. It's all I need to get that working. So that's going to go over on the other side. I was just testing the fit. Woohoo! Getting there. So my monitor keeps falling forward no matter how much I tighten the tension on this monitor arm. So I've got a solution. So we'll see how this holds. I've just wrapped some picture framing wire around. Just give it a little bit tension relief. So if I back out, looks a lot straighter, much better. Well, it's the end of the day, on my first day setting up the console and trying things out. And here's where I got to. I've got the TV moved up. I've got the computer temporarily in place. I'm just testing out the positioning of things. That seems to be okay. I've determined a couple things. One is I'm not sure how I'm going to use my hue lights anymore. They used to shine up behind my other desk, and they won't really work in this case. I found out that I should have made all my cable runs there about 2 feet longer. I pulled them back over to here. I was almost able to get them into that patch bay spot there, and I could have just done 1/4 inch without rewiring anything, left them there. I mean, I still could technically do that with the patch bay if I put the patch bay underneath there. I have no audio hooked up yet. Just positioning everything. I mean, put the couch kind of back where it goes. Spacing seems about like it used to be with the old desk. It's just going to be a lot more crowded at the front, and it's harder to get in behind because every time I need to move that desk out, I gotta pull stuff from the side and then pull the desk out. But it's all going to work, I think. Haven't given up yet. I had a couple moments of almost giving up. The only thing else is that ergonomically, this keyboard tray is a little bit high for me. My hand should be down about here. It's got to be up a little bit. So still, you can see the VUs under there. Could move the monitor up if I need to see the VUs, but that's going to be all my synths. They're going to be pretty well standard levels. Over on that side will be most of the runs from the studio. I can see the main VUs over there. The automation isn't really needed, although I still plan on trying to get it working. My Amphions will probably be slightly in the way of my camera up there, so I'll probably pivot that. But once the speakers are in, I think this is going to sound great. I'm going to see if I can get there tomorrow. So right now I've taken apart my old desk, and I'm converting each side into a rollable cabinet that'll be rack mountable for gear. This side is going to have the power amps. This side is going to have audio gear. They're going to go on either side of the console. I've tested out my speakers for placement. I'm just putting temporary wiring in place to try and get some sense of lengths I'm going to need. I need the cabinets to see how far I need to be able to roll them out, because I need to be able to pull them far enough out from the side here to be able to drag the console out for whenever I need to make changes in behind, which is hopefully almost never once this is set up. So yeah, the room's in a bit of a disarray, but this is what it takes to put a console into your studio. A lot of work and planning. Okay, working on the racks. Got the wheels on one of them, and got the rack rails showed up later today. And now it's evening. I decided to do a bit more. And I took a hacksaw and a sawzall and took this 16U rail and cut it down to 12. Or maybe it's 13. I think it's 12. Could be 13. And then put an angle at the bottom so it'll tilt and hopefully fit right below the drawer. Day 2 of moving the console into the studio. I've been working on the racks, and this rack is complete. So I left the drawer in place. I've got the power amp for the console, the automation amp, and the amp for my Amphions all in this one rack. So all the amplifiers on this side. I'm missing one U panel because I thought I only needed 12U on the bottom, but it turned out to be 13, so I'm short by one U of a blank panel, so I'll have to pick that up. But pretty well getting there. That's going to be that side. Woohoo! Okay, it's just about been a week since I moved the console into the studio. That was Saturday. At first I was in shock with this massive thing in here, everything in disarray after everything had been set up so nicely. But then I started figuring things out and where things were going to go, and started customizing my desk, and that seemed to start making things seem okay. But then I got sound through it and got to hear my Amphions in this room and was just blown away by the sound. So I was committed. I'm doing it. It's completely taken over my studio. So as you can see, it's in place. Now what I did is I took my old custom desk. I built both sides to be for 19-inch racks, even though one side was housing my computer. I put those on some wheels so they're rollable, and made it so I could pull them out from the studio, or from the back of the studio, from the console itself, and hook up my Amphions and my mix cubes because I had those wires connected. I've plugged in both the Mo2 16As, so that's 32 ins and 32 outs, which I've now mapped out. See this in a second. The other side of my desk, I had already pre-planned. I would take the door off of it and put rack rails in. So I bought some rack rails. I thought it was 12U. It turned out 13U fit perfectly. I can actually still open the drawer. I've got my Amphion power amp on top. This is also on wheels, but basically just houses amplifiers. So as you can hear, this thing is dead quiet. You're right beside the amp. You can't hear a thing. So I didn't need a separate machine room. Does it get warm? A little bit. Has it felt like it's making the room super warm? Probably in the summer. But, you know, for the moment, it seems good. I was testing out some sound through it with temporary cables. I only have a few. So I patched into a patch bay and then plugged my synths into the same channels, just different synths, and listened to them through there, and confirmed that I really like the sound. And then I spent most of the week, I'd already started on this long ago, working on this map of how everything's going to connect together. So over here is the actual mic ins, line outs, and what they're going to as the default in the studio. And then in purple is what my cables are going to be. And then the smaller boxes sort of show the two-show connections and what they actually map out to, because they're very specific on the back of the console. So this patch bay is going to be filled with some auxiliary sends. My sends 1 and 2 are going to be going to the PCM 91 down here, which won't be there. I'm going to replace my SPX 90 with FX 900 instead, so I have stereo, and that's going to be on 3, 4, and then 5, 6, which is the default headphone cube, will go to my Mackie headphone amp. 3 and 4 will also go to the headphone amp as a backup, and then the rest of my gear is going to go into the patch bay as patch points, line outs, and they'll have to get labeled. And then this rack that I had from before, it was sitting at the back with my Yamaha DMP7 mixer. It's going to get turned into a sidecar, so it's going to kind of sit beside me It's going to be a bit shorter, 8U. That'll have the headphones, the 500 series rack for compressors, the effects, and then most importantly, my mastering or mix bus compressor and my mix bus EQ. And so I'm going to have cable lengths that come out long enough that this will be on a rolling sort of stand. So that's the plan. What else? Move the TV up about 5 inches, so that got it to a height where when I'm sitting, it's above the monitor, and people sitting on the couch here can also, well, you can see the TV. The console's out from the wall right now for testing stuff. So now I just got millions and millions of cables, all those cables to get made. The ones in yellow are ones in the studio that I have to solder myself because they're here. The other ones I'm outsourcing, and maybe the outsourcing will be done by the time that I get done my cabling. And then it can all marry together, and I can slide that against the wall and start tracking in here, start mixing, doing all of it. It's going to be so good. So there you have it. The console is now right in front of me in my studio. I've got one mic connection set up. I've got the 2 mix for output, and none of my synths are connected. None of the cabling's connected. I've got all this wiring to do. And that's next. I'm waiting on the quote for the soldering I'm getting done. Get that going. That Amber 3501 intermodulation distortion analyzer is now in the hands of another tech I know who's amazing, and I'm expecting he's going to be able to get it functioning, and then I'll find out if it was worth all that time to go through and calibrate the intermodulation distortion settings. I'll probably find they're all set perfectly fine. I still have a couple little issues with some of the channels, but I've got so many channels that I can easily reroute audio to other channels. So in part 8, I will try to wrap up. I will try to get to the point where some sound is going through this, and then I will do a video on the Sony MPX and its history and what I know about it and what I've learned in all this time being on the forums, researching, talking to people, and finding out everything I could about this amazing console, which I think is actually pretty amazing. Oh, and there might be another surprise too. You'll have to stay tuned. Thanks for watching. See you next time.